then I had this option on what topic to take, and I was interested in diverse communities or socially mixed communities or racially mixed communities, and of course for my dissertation advisor, it was very important to get involved in what was happening in Chicago. And she was part of the activism, actually. She was part academic, part activist of this local advisory council of Cabrini Green. She was Janet Smith. I don't know if you have you read something about her.
I think I just did.
She's a professor at UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, and she has some other books on Cabrini Green too. So I went involved in the community. I started to interview people. I started going to meetings, especially a meeting that the alderman there was organizing in terms of these two very distinct groups. The new guys that were living in condos, very wealthy guys, and most of them white. And then the old guys that were living there their whole life, that they were born and raised there, and they were losing their houses, and they were fighting a lot on that. So it was a whole experience to see those meetings, to interview people on both sides, to see what they were thinking about each other. So it has a lot of different issues that we're raising at that time, in terms of income, in terms of race, in terms of biased and one-sided opinions about the other, about problems that we're trying to erase, or symbolic issues that they were trying to erase about Cabrini Green, and all that stuff.
So what would you say was some of the issues as far as the culture between the new residents, the high income, and the people that were there for years?
There are a lot of dimensions in which you can assess the situation. You can assess it in terms of, because every time people ask about do they work, that's the first question that people do about mixed income. But you can ask, you can respond to that. Do they work for what? Work for coexistence, work for friendship, work for jobs, or they work for inequality? I would say none of them, maybe. In terms of jobs, people were still unemployed. The rates of unemployment were about 30% for poor blacks and 0 to 1% for wealthy whites. Inequality was still there, so people were very, very low income on one side and very wealthy on the other side. Friendship was very superficial. People were just saying hello here and there, but some other times they were fighting each other. And a lot of encounters, there were a lot of pressures and power struggles in terms of how to evaluate what the other is doing. And so, for example, people were saying to me, I'm living in a Section 8 apartment or in a public housing apartment, and I can't barbecue in front of my house. I cannot smoke. I cannot smoke marijuana, for example. If I do that, I got evicted. If they do that, they just get a fine, right? So they get to control the behavior, the complete behavior of the other people. So that's, for them, that's like if you were rich and you were going to buy a property in a place that is not, is surrounded by rich neighborhoods, but that special place, that particular place, is not rich, is not wealthy. So if you go there, maybe you will think of some, some protections for your investments, and that protection for your investments was about this control of the behavior of the others. So they evicted, they displaced most people from Cabrini Green, and they turned down the big buildings, and just a few of them were allowed to come back. And how do they select people for coming back? They do a very, very strict screening of those people.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard a situation of a woman, an old woman, in which her grandchildren was, I don't know, had a small fight at school. It was a very small issue, but she wasn't accepted to come back to the community just for that. And they were doing drug testing, everything for those guys for coming back, because they wanted just the very, very few ones that were this is very US language, like the I simply laugh about it, like you is the acceptable poor. No, it's not the acceptable poor. It's the people that you are allowed to give them help.
Poor?
I forgot that. Yeah, poor, but the
just saying ghetto.
That.
Like
no. I mean it's a term. It's a concept that you regularly use in the US when you say that some part of the poor people that are acceptable to give them allowances and assistance, and the deserving poor, the deserving poor, which is a very discriminative concept, but it's very used everywhere in the United States. Like you deserve to be helped, you deserve, but just the guys that really deserve in those terms are just a few of them. So what do you do with the rest? You just let them die in other part of the city or the metropolis? So that's part of the things that I was hearing in my interviews, in my observations, and in the things that I was reading everywhere.
Yeah, in the video the link that I showed you for the mixed income video I did, there was a study. It wasn't Cabrini Green. It was another housing project or something, but they were saying during the time they did the study, the average interaction was no more than 10 minutes annually.
Yes, I mean, it's a whole world about interactions. Middle income people in general, they don't need their neighbors, and that's irrespective of race. They don't need their neighbors because they have enough money to buy what they need. They don't need a neighbor for taking care of their children. They don't need a neighbor for, I don't know, help them with food. They don't need a neighbor for watching their property. They just don't need them. So they just encounter each other with their dogs in the parks because they live alone or something like that. But poor people do need their neighbors. So they have more sociability.
Yeah.
So you have two groups. On one side, one group which is not very social even among themselves, and another group that really need each other very tightly. And then if you put those two groups together and you add racist problems, historical racist problems, you have more trouble than before, right? So
Martin Luther
people
King,
that you don't usually,
Martin Luther King, he said that when he went to Chicago and did a march, he said he had seen more racism in Chicago than anywhere in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Well, so we have this.
Yeah, the thing is that
racism is just in the South.
Yeah. And in that historical moment, what was happening is that in Chicago, they were living very, very separated. They don't even know about each other. So if some people that you don't know start to do a march and you feel, and this is another key concept that I learned there, outnumbered, and if whites feel outnumbered, they start to feel afraid. Their racism, their internal racism start to arise, and they start to do some stuff that they didn't do before. So in Mississippi, they were being openly racist long ago. In Chicago, that was something new because some people started to encounter each other. So these type of places, these mixed income communities, they do something with people that didn't happen before. I interview a white woman that started to say, I am becoming more racist now She was very, very honest. Actually, I appreciate that honesty. She was openly saying to me that she was becoming more racist, because she was seeing that people was, in her terms, people was being lazy, and people don't wanted to work, and all other stuff that you can see in prejudice. She was saying that she was seeing that kind of things on the streets, right? So this type of complex, mixed income complex, brought all of these issues more extensively and more explicitly. And all this internal racism, all this idea of racism without racists, like from 1968 till now in the US, all the discussions are about racism doesn't exist in the open discussion. It's all under the table. It's all behind you. They never say something that is not politically correct or polite. But in these particular places, that flourishes, that appears more openly. And that was really interesting to me.
Now, how close is Cabrini Green to downtown Chicago? Like 10
Very close. Very close. Yeah. I mean, from Cabrini Green, you can see the towers. You can see the Hancock Tower that is just there.
So why is it I'm finding that the majority of these mixed income places are always so close to downtown?
Yes, it happens that in Chicago you have some public housing that were built in the urban renewal projects of the 1960s or 1950s, and they were close to downtown at that moment. That urban renewal was also displacement, and they put a lot of people there. Most of them were World War II veterans in the case of Cabrini Green, but they were mixed with people from Poland, Romania, Chinese people, Black people. Actually, they call at the beginning of Cabrini Green, they call it the United Nations. They said that at the beginning it was all mixed. And then it became all Black, 99% Black, and now is being more mixed. But I don't know how long it's gonna be like that.
Okay, and one of the main issues I have, maybe the main issue, is that it seems like, okay, they say mixed income is supposed to alleviate poverty. That's what they're saying the agenda is, but to me, it creates more of a dependency on the government. It creates more of a dependency on government assistance rather than just accept mostly women or women with children. If you want to alleviate poverty, why don't you try to have families in there so they can have generational wealth or generational income, and that will alleviate poverty in the long run? What is your take on that?
I won't say that it creates more dependence. I would say the opposite, because what's happening is it's in terms of several institutions, especially in terms of schools. Mm-hmm. Those areas that were 100% poor and 100% Black before are becoming less poor and less Black. So a lot of different institutions and social service organizations are leaving, because they are not, in terms of numbers, the percentage of poor.
They're going to the charter schools.
Yeah, no, I mean, the social organizations that were working there, they are leaving those places because in terms of numbers for their funders, they are not giving them money because that area is no longer poor. That area is medium poor, right?
Okay.
So, and the assistance from the state and from several other institutions is lower than before. And in terms of poverty, is not helping in terms of jobs. So people is like middle income people is not hiring the lower income people. They don't have opportunities for working, like for example in a Target, and a big Target that they built there. What else? The schools, they are building more private schools or charter schools or selective enrollment schools. And what it happens there that with the displaced people, for example, the old neighborhood school that was there, which was the Jenner School, it was getting underfunded because they were having less and less students because they were displaced, right? And if you have less students, you have less money. And if you have less money, you have to have more people in the same room, and the quality of your classes is going down, and then nobody wants to enroll there, and then it's a vicious circle of deterioration and defunding and everything like that, right? So there's a lot of different issues related to institutions, about the symbolism of these places in which a different name is superposed on top of Cabrini Green. Nobody talks about Cabrini Green, just the old public housing people, and they put another name. Then you have the issue of jobs, the issue of sociability. So there are a lot of different things that happens at the same time in these places.
Okay, so wow, that's deep. Do you think, when I said dependent, I'm saying the people who actually get accepted into the housing and that take advantage of these programs? Do you feel? But I agree, and I think maybe I should have clarified that in the video, but I didn't look at it that deeply as you just put it. I just feel like the people, it's a tough situation because they're already at a disadvantage from, the government and racism. So generally, and that's kind of when I want to segue into it, the appeal of mixed income. Do you feel it's misleading?
That's another big issue. For many people, this sounds like great. Like, let's do mixed income because we all need to live together. We don't want to be segregated anymore. It's better to be mixed than to be segregated, and so on. Like a happy talk. A lot of happy talk. Actually, there are articles, scientific articles about this happy talk. But after a while, after weeks or some months, that happy talks becomes deception, because it becomes disappointment, because they were expecting different things. Wealthy whites, even them, they were saying, "Oh, I'm gonna contribute to the mix. I need to be here because I want to teach them something good for their lives," or something like that. But in the end, it becomes something about imposing ways of life on the other, and
what
not
are
being
some of the things that people were telling you in the interviews about, them, their expectations, and not the expectations not being met?
Like, people were just expecting, for example, there was a guy that well, all white guys hate when black people just stay standing in the street. That sound, for me, for foreign people, it's so weird that people get mad about people being standing on the street. What's the problem? For me, there is not a problem with that. I'm happy to be standing on the street and just having a conversation. But for them, is to be lazy, is not having a job, is to be dependent on the state, on welfare. So they hate that, and they say, "Why the hell you don't go to your porch, your park, your backyard or something, but don't be loitering on the streets?" I don't know why they didn't like that. For me, I love to have people on the street because it seems more safe. A street with people is safer than a street without people. But for them, it was like they didn't like that. I'm sorry. So I was hearing stuff like that, and you can see that on the article, and I can even send you a video that I made for my dissertation defense with the voices of these guys. So a lot of stuff, when they evaluate the behavior of the other, they forget that people like them also behave like that. But if this guy is black, okay, now this is bad, just because this guy is black, right? So they don't say they are racist. They don't say that they hate the other guy, but some crazy stuff happens with them. And there was even a guy that wanted he was a crazy guy. He wanted the terrorists to put a bomb on one of these buildings because he didn't like that. So he was wanting to. Why don't these guys, these loitering guys, don't just smuggle one of these terrorists? He was creating this fantasy on his head. He was crazy. Smuggle and steal something from these terrorists, and these terrorists on a vendetta go back and put a bomb on the building. He was creating this fantasy that the terrorists will save him from this threat of the low-income people living in Cabrini. Yeah, he was particularly crazy. Not all the guys was like him, but he was particularly super crazy. Yeah.
So what were some of the people who, on the low income spectrum, what were they saying about their expectations not being met?
On one side, you have people missing their friends and their relatives that were displaced. A lot of them, they were feeling lonely. They were feeling isolated, especially the ones that were living in mixed-income buildings, because in Cabrini you have like 3 different situations. You have the row houses, which are still 100% low-income public housing. Then you have the Marshall buildings, which are Section 8. And then you have mixed-income buildings, in which you have a percentage of public housing. So especially those guys were the most isolated guys, and they were treated, they were under this control of the behavior of the building associations, the condo associations, in which they control what they can do, what they can't do, like in terms of barbecues or inviting people or just smoking a cigarette or marijuana or whatever. So they were disappointed in terms of that. They were believing that a mixed income situation will be better for the community, that new buildings were better. Actually, they were happy about the new apartments, which because in terms of quality, it was much better than public housing, these mixed income buildings. And I would say there are 2 benefits that I would say are better in mixed income buildings. The quality of public housing, which is of course better, but I don't know for how long, but it's much better. And
you
the
mean
second
like
is
the amenities and stuff.
The amenities outside, but the actual apartment inside is very good. It's very high quality apartment. Okay. At least for my standards, for a Latin American, is very good. And then the safety, security and less crime. But that happens in terms of having more cops, because there is white people. If you have white people inside, there will be more cops, there will be more calls, more paranoia, and all that happens with that, right? But in fact, people is less stressed with less crime. Like the old lady walking in the streets is less worried about that, right? So that will be 2 benefits. But the rest is isolation, missing the guys that were displaced, disappointment in terms of these rules and regulations, oppressions of these powerful groups that were controlling the area and having more power, etc.
So that leads me to my next question. Why? Because I'm reading $41 million. This was from last year. They're going to put 43 market rate units, 27 affordable units, and 36 public housing units.
That's my article? That's another thing.
No, not yours, but this is an article from 2016. About some units in the Cabrini Green locations. And number one, there's always more market rate units
Yeah,
than
exactly.
affordable units.
To make it affordable, yes.
Yeah. And okay, yeah, that's true. But if they, when you really think about it, why in the heck are they, why don't they just put the money into the community? Why do they even have to attract high income, the upper class people? Why not just put $41 million into the best way to better the community? Why do you have to attract, why do you have to bring people with money?
Yeah.
Why not just help the people and put the money there?
Yeah, you end up helping the rich instead of helping the poor. But that is happening everywhere around the world, especially in the US. I mean, in 2008, I was expecting the government, the US government, in terms of bailing out the big banks, just helping people, but they were giving all the money to the banks instead of helping poor people that were evicted from their houses or all the problems that happens. But in this case, what is the rationale for them? They wanted to make affordable, but also there is this big stigma created around public housing. That is, they truly believe that it was a mistake from the past. That is a failure. So they wanted to do it differently. So they do, why don't we do this mix? Because if we do it, it's not going to happen if we put 100% of people all together. It's going to appear all these other problems. So we have to help people and put a lot of efforts for bringing market rate housing, condo buildings. So in the end, you end up building much less public housing and a lot of other types of housing, and that create a scarcity of housing, a lot of homelessness, and a lot of other problems, just for a few places that are getting better, now, or better in just a few terms, right?
Does the crime move to other areas? Like the people who can't, okay, the building is demolished.
Yeah.
And they have to start building new buildings. So when the building is first demolished, does that push the crime away to other areas?
Yeah, in some sense, yes. But Cabrini Green is still a place where drugs are dealt, and it still happens. Not as much as before, but it still happens. But that's not to blame the residents or the old residents. Like every type or every piece of drug is going to be produced and also consumed by some other guy, right? And that guy could be white, black, Latino, everybody's involved in that. But yes, they started to have more cops. They started to have a better working of the police in some issues. But I would say, again, just because white people were living there. If just black people were living there, they don't give a damn, right? So
with all the crime in Chicago, are they policing different in Cabrini Greens? They have more police in Cabrini? Like, is there what's the difference?
More police that they have before in Cabrini Green. Okay. Or at least a better police approach. Because before they were telling me something like a police officer or a police car, they were picking a guy from one gang, and they were instead of arresting this guy, they were dropping this guy by the other side of the street, by the territory of the other gang, just for the guy to be shot and dead. So they believed that was the solution. They were not going to involve in this situation. They wanted to kill each other and have the solution among themselves. So those are the vicious operations of the police that are still happening today in many places. But at least in Cabrini Green, they are trying to work better than that.
Now, there was a settlement, because let's kind of switch to community involvement and what people can do and some solutions. There was a settlement that was reached. I guess people, as we were saying earlier, they wanted to be at the table. They wanted to make sure they get a certain amount of affordable housing and different things like that. Do you know about the settlement that happened, or the fight for it?
There was a long struggle. If you want to see that, there is a documentary. I have it here. It's 70 Acres, the documentary about Cabrini Green. It's a very good one.
Okay.
I have the video. Where is it? Let me see. I'm gonna send you the link.
Okay.
Let me see. There was a historical organization in Chicago around the Cabrini Green in particular. It's about that organization. A lot of people working there, like Carol Steele, Deidre Brewster, I forgot the other name. They were working for 30, 40, 50 years to stay there so as not to be displaced. Mm. So they are still fighting there. They still have the row houses in which about maybe 100 families did live there in their old houses. And the other guys are living in public housing in these mixed income communities, or the other ones are in these Section 8 buildings. But there is a strong organization around that. They have a lot of power. They have this deal with the city of Chicago of having respect about their right to the city and the right to remain there, because they were the old residents living there always. So they have this right to return, and they reach this right to return. The thing is that they are always fighting is in which terms this right to return is going to come true, in terms of living isolated in mixed income buildings, in terms of how many people is going to really actually live there after all the new buildings are built, because there are still buildings, more complexes. So it's a long fight, and I would say it's going to be for 10 more years maybe when they finish the last mixed income buildings.
Okay, so
yeah, I'm gonna send you the link so I don't forget this.
And would you say they received? Was there a high amount of support backing them from the community?
Yes, a lot. I mean, they described that as the old grandmas fighting for the communities, and they were very, very powerful women. And they were very respected and followed by all the communities. So they were very united. The community is very cohesive, the whole community. They still have some parties that they have, like forgot the name, but it's like the Historical Monday or the Monday Block or something like that. So, and they're all people that doesn't live in Cabrini Green is still going to those parties, to those barbecues, and they're enjoying that. So I'm sending this the link for the documentary, so you can watch this.
So, is there any way people can prevent mixed income?
just to fight. I mean, you were showing one of the pictures that you show in this. I saw part of your video. It was a demonstration. I think it was in New Orleans after Katrina, in which they have this sign saying, "Make this neighborhood mixed income." Yeah. So you can fight both ways, right? Not to be displaced in your old neighborhood, just to be a part of a real estate operation. But on the other side, you can fight, okay, if you want to do mixed income, why don't you mess these guys, these really affluent, privileged guys, that they are living concentrated, not concentrated poverty, but concentrated wealth? Should be part of the problem. The problem of segregation has two sides. One is the concentration of poverty. The other side is the concentration of wealth, and both are equally problematic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to do mixed income, you have to do it equally, right?
Mm-hmm. Now they try to say, I've read some areas or articles that say the middle class may be a solution since it's not what you just said. It's kind of in the middle. What's your take on that?
Yeah, maybe, but the thing again is like, for me, the discourse is like the government doesn't want to take care of this problem. For them, it's an issue that they want to get rid of it, and they say something like, "Why don't the middle class take care of these guys? Let's do the middle class take care, and let's expect to have a trickle down." This is again a trickle down, like neoliberal economics from Friedman. Let's expect some trickle down in terms of jobs, in terms of behavior, in terms of social networks, in terms of social control, and we don't do anything else. We deliver. We give the problem to the private real estate companies in terms of building their houses, and we give the problem to the middle class and their condo associations to take care of social control, jobs, or other stuff. So it's a way, for me, it's a way for the government and the state of getting rid of the problem.
Wow. Okay. It just seems like they're never going to take accountability for anything as far as the government.
I mean, I would say, for not being that negative, I would say that mixed income communities, mixed income living, would be a good idea if it is joined by other measures. Like, if you put very unequal people together, what's the issue? What's the solution with that if they are still unequal, right? Like, living together or living close by is not gonna change that inequality. Actually, the title of my dissertation was "Bringing Inequality Closer." It's just bringing people very unequally close by, in close proximity. But if you do other stuff like decreasing inequality, economic inequality, bringing more opportunities to these places, not just moving people to opportunities, but moving opportunities to people, or resources to people, and other types of stuff, maybe mixed income could work better. But just doing it alone, just moving people for moving people, and leaving them together and expecting to have some magic to happen, I don't think so.
Okay, and I touched on this briefly in the video. To me, since we're coming more of a globalized planet and social media and everything and technology, I feel like a lot of it is a PR move to, hey, we're not as racist as we used to be, as far as to how other countries perceive us. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't live there in the 60s, but I felt a lot of racism living there. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist in other countries. It exists everywhere.
Right.
But in the US, it's serious, man. It's serious, and it is something that you felt in the air. You don't really hear it, but you felt it in the air. In other issues, not in my study, I was always taking the bus, and the bus was full of people, and there was a black lady sitting there, and the other seat was always empty because nobody wanted to sit there. And I always sit there. What's the problem with these other guys? It is an empty seat. And I was doing the line on the supermarket, and the supermarket was full of people, like 10 cars for each line. But there was one line in which the queue was just with black people, like 2 people. And I was saying, okay, this is just 2 people. The other lines are 10 people. I'm not going to wait. This is much better than the other. And I did the line. And after me, like 5 more white guys put before me. I mean, behind me. Right? So this is this feeling of feeling outnumbered when you get in the buses, when you get in on the trains, when you walk on the street, when you greet people.
Yeah, up north, as
It's
far
everywhere.
compared to the rest of the country, like here in the Midwest, it's a lot. It's a lot more passive aggressive and indirect.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to really observe it to see it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of cynicism around it, because people can greet, people can smile a lot, but then if you see that face, I was going with my son. My son was born there in the University of Chicago Hospital in the South Side, full of Black communities. And of course, all the staff there was Black. Some of them were whites, the doctors, the high status personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing a Black patient approaching a doctor or a nurse that was white, and she was approaching like with a big smile. "Oh, you're coming here. I'm so happy to see you." And then she turned to the other side, and her face just changed from 1 second from being happy, super happy, to being depressed. So you show like a super happy face, and then a face of depression, and maybe she had other problems, whatever, I don't really know, but I have seen those kind of issues in many places, when people have this happy face on top of them, but then another type of face, another type of reaction, another type of commentary on their back, that they don't really want to say it out loud, right, explicitly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, do you have any last words?
But it's a good country to know. I went, my son was born there. It's gonna be always his country, and I enjoyed being there. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed living in the South Side with full of Black people. They were really like, in Latin America, we love to hug people. We love to greet people, to touch people. Okay. And that feeling, I didn't feel that in 5 years. But then when I went to live in Hyde Park in my last year, I really felt that. Like, people were real people. People were being like authentic, how to say, like warm. Like we really miss that when we are Latin Americans, when we live in other places like the US, we really miss that kind of
community.
Of community, exactly. So I felt a lot of that from Black communities there, and I miss that. I really like it.
So the mixed income communities, people are usually inside, nobody's outside. There's not a lot going on. Is that how it usually?
I mean, they go outside. They go outside, but you will see public spaces in the parks, like Black friends playing with Black friends, and white friends playing with white friends with their dogs, and they meet with their dogs and stuff like that. But they don't meet each other. They just say hello, maybe some polite things, but they don't intermingle. They don't do stuff together. Just a few exceptions, but just a few of them. But the majority don't do that. At least in that place. There are other places, of course, in which people is used to have a more mixed environment, like in Oak Park, which is an old mixed community in the suburb of Chicago, or even Hyde Park with the University of Chicago. Is people, even though most students of the University of Chicago are whites, they are used to share their spaces with Black people, and they enjoy that, most of them. But in this case, which is the North Side, which is a whole white area, super white area, people are not used to have Black people as neighbors, so it's problematic for them to be outnumbered again in that neighborhood.
So if this isn't working, why are they? I think HUD just announced recently they're going to spend like 1.6 billion, and you have these millions and billions of dollars that are going to keep being spent on these new mixed income initiatives. And they've even admitted everything that you're saying. They admit that There's not much of an interaction. The few jobs that they were given, it doesn't really give them more money or stable employment.
Yeah, but you have to understand that housing policies, which are, as people say, are brick and mortar policies, right? Are stone policies, policies for doing physical things. Those policies are most of the time intended for the economy. So if you have a lot of money, you will spend that money in the economy and not just helping people, but in the economy, fueling the housing market and putting money on subsidies and constructing, building more buildings, etc. So a lot of the times, even though it has failed in terms of interaction, they don't care. They just care. They will be worried if this will be a mess in terms of crime. If it's not a mess in terms of crime, they will say it is a success. If people is living on their own, they don't care. If people are not greeting each other, they don't really care. They will just care if this becomes again a new ghetto. But for them, it's not again a new ghetto. And the issue of gentrification and displacement is not an issue for them. So if they can help the market, if they can put some money, some real estate and fuel the economy with that money, with those billions, they will do it again and again. Yes, for sure, especially with Trump.
Okay, that's all I got.
Yeah.
Do you have any last words or something we didn't touch on that you wanted to bring up?
No, that's fine. I mean, I don't really remember all the details because I was doing my fieldwork in 2013 and I finished my dissertation in 2014. And now I'm going to start writing a book, but I need to remember several stuff. But just send me a book on my dissertation, which was a comparison between Chicago and Santiago, about different communities that are socially mixed. So when you finish your report or your work, just send me the link of the video, and I can circulate that on other scholars and other academics. Right?
What video?
You can, you're gonna do another video on YouTube or something, or another.
Well, this is I'll be doing this continually. So when you do your book or whatever, you're welcome to come back on and talk about it. But
perfect.
I'm going all over.
Perfect. So I'm gonna keep following you on your YouTube channel.
Okay, excellent. Right? Okay, I appreciate it.
So and good luck with your work and be brave and keep fighting. That's all I want to say. Keep fighting and do with that's something that I was mad actually when I just returned in 2014 and 2015. All these movements that I was expecting, like the Black Lives Matters and all of that, they started. Yeah. And I was expecting long before, like, why you didn't rise before? Why were people silent or sleeping? But now they are rising, and that sounds good. Sounds better. I mean, you need to fight.
Nothing else to do, really.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So good luck with it, and I'll keep following you. And if you need something else, just shoot me an email. All right.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right.
All right.